14-hour overnight train ride from the sleepy border town of Chelm, Poland to Kyiv is one of only a handful of ways you can get to one of Europe's great capital cities during the war. Hour upon hour through villages, farms, factory towns, wide open fields and forests. It's also on these trains that hundreds of thousands of Ukrainians fled the country at the outset of Russia's invasion on February 24th. Some on this very train, in this exact cabin, their lives upended. Kyiv itself is a classically beautiful European capital city of almost 3 million people. Stunning old buildings, modern new ones, restaurants, clubs, museums, people out going about their day. And as a visitor to the city on a beautiful September day, you get a sense of normalcy at first. But that sense of normalcy starts to disappear a bit as your traveler's eye takes in the details of the city in its current state. The number of people in fatigues, the sandbagged and concrete-enclosed statues, concrete blocks and welded-together steel I-beams used to obstruct and derail tanks are scattered around the city, ready to be pushed into the streets. And below the Independence column in Maidan Square in the center of the city is a little grassy knoll filled with Ukrainian flags with the names of the dead from the war written on them. In a war whose intent seems in part to erase Ukrainian culture, it's that culture itself that has risen up to help unify the country. All of the artists, musicians, curators, satirists, all using their talents to contribute in any way they can, to help galvanize Ukrainians in the fight for the survival of their country, both its proud heritage and its potential future. And it's because of that cultural front that we're here in Ukraine. Our first stop is at Mystetskyi Arsenal, one of the most prominent museums in the country, to meet with its director. Mystetskyi Arsenal is the largest cultural museum in Ukraine, housed in a massively impressive building that used to be an actual arsenal and fortification well into the 20th century. And this is the museum's director, Olesia Ostrovska-Lyuta. She holds and has held several board and committee positions over the years and has a master's in cultural studies. Because cultural centers have been targets during the war, the museum removed and hid all of its artworks. But in normal times, it's an incredibly vibrant place. Arsenal discusses what's valuable in society, often focusing on social debates, digging into those issues through the lens of contemporary art.
And we also try to uncover what is unknown in culture to our audiences, and paradoxically, that's often the Ukrainian culture. Because through the 20th century, Ukrainian culture was really hidden until 1991, when Ukraine gained its independence. You couldn't speak about many issues, both political and cultural. And that led to a situation where you have quite little knowledge about many phenomena. The Ukrainian language was banned from public usage in the 19th century. You couldn't teach it in school, you couldn't publish books in Ukrainian, you couldn't publish
in the
notes.
19th century?
Yes,
okay.
by Tsarist Russia. Lenin thought it was impossible to keep Ukraine within the Russian body without giving Ukraine some autonomy. Therefore, they started this Ukrainization policy, which meant keeping bureaucracy in Ukrainian language, introducing Ukrainian language to school. You had Ukrainian theaters, Ukrainian writers, Ukrainian publishing houses.
Boy, there was a lot going on in the 20s.
Exactly. There was a very fruitful period, which ended with a huge massacre.
In the 30s with Stalin's purges.
Exactly. He executed Holodomor, which is political famine in Ukraine, which took up 4 million deaths, to curtail this Ukrainization policy, to make Ukraine more homogeneous with Russia. When Stalin introduced a social realist doctrine, authors that were not social realists were physically executed. And those were hundreds of Ukrainian cultural figures, hundreds.
Cultural leaders of all types, from writers, educators, musicians, artists, were all at risk of imprisonment or execution, and their works destroyed. Like the artist Mikhailo Boychuk.
Boychukism was a modernist phenomenon of the 20th century. After the movement was banned, its leader, Mikhailo Boychuk, was physically executed. The murals were destroyed. Only a limited number of artifacts remained because some other cultural figures, artists, preserved them by hiding them in their apartments. For Ukrainian culture, it was absolutely devastating.
Yeah, you just wiped out an entire generation of knowledge and creation.
I think it's a common knowledge on Ukrainian cultural scene now that 2020s were the next fruitful period. That's why for the cultural scene, this invasion falls into the pattern of destruction, and it brings all the expectations and emotions, but also a lot of fear and resistance. What we also know from our history that appeasing the aggressor, agreeing to certain level of terror to avert larger terror doesn't work. Now imagine the moment when we read all sorts of letters from, let's say, European intellectuals calling to end this war and accept a compromise with Russia. When I look at such a letter, I suddenly imagine what will happen next. I see only atrocities and destruction in the future. Learning about our culture now is a part of our resilience as a society. Every piece of culture that is destroyed, every piece of culture that is questioned by the aggressor, by Russians, is worth standing for.
So in the face of the Russian invasion making it to suburban cities like Irpin and Bucha, just a handful of miles outside of Kyiv, and leaving a trail of destruction in their wake, with the reality of Russians targeting museums, churches, and other cultural centers, with museum employees having their own families to take care of during the invasion, Alessia and her team stayed to protect the museum.
None of my museum department team fled. Actually, all of them stayed. It didn't seem neither exotic nor very brave or anything. It was just one of the strategies that people in Kyiv were using.
Yeah.
It was just the way people resisted. You absolutely cannot agree to being erased again.
When the war started, what happened to everything?
Our team, the team of Arsenal, had a few tasks, major tasks. One task was collection protection, to care for the collection, to prepare it for evacuation, to perform evacuation, to stay also in Kyiv, to coordinate with other services in Kyiv.
Well, and this is, I assume, happening at museums all over the place.
Another part of the team was communicating, writing letters to explain what's going on and supporting Ukrainian authors abroad. And then a new function added to add to the resilience of people in Ukraine.
So in the middle of a war, they got back to what they do best, starting conversations through art.
We thought that this is a moment to do an exhibition about this. How do you read art today after what happened to you?
They realized that things took on new meanings during the war, from simple daily phrases to centuries-old works of art.
There was an old Soviet cliché, wish, I wish you clear skies above your head, which seemed as an absolutely empty phrase. I could hear it all through my childhood.
Yeah.
And it was such an empty phrase. But after what happens to you with this invasion, it suddenly gets such a literary meaning.
I wish you clear skies,
Exactly.
Yeah. The exhibition showed works that now held very different meanings to the people looking at them through the lens of the war they are living in.
For example, when you look at biblical scenes, and Exodus now reminds you the experience of evacuation in Kiev.
Yeah.
And that was a real exodus. You had hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people trying to leave at the same time.
A 1980s painting of a beach scene in Odessa now reminds viewers of the landmines buried there. A whimsical work of two nude carpenters looks like a home with its roof blown off to one person, or the promise of reconstruction to another.
Our team who was working in very hard conditions. But the experience of our team were not unique. They were quite typical of the experience of people in Kiev.
So they created a video exhibition of all their curatorial staff describing their experiences during the war.
At the beginning of the exhibition, we opened the exhibition. It was very well perceived.
So you were able to open it in here?
Yes. It was not as huge as we used to do. This exhibition was much smaller compared to what we used to do.
It's amazing that you managed to put on an exhibition in the middle of the war.
This is what we thought too.
Yeah.
And also you have to do rather smaller exhibitions for security reasons, because you have to be able to evacuate.
And they quickly discovered that this exhibition was inspiring their visitors to talk about their experiences during the war.
There was such a sign that this resonates, that people need to tell their stories. We have a shared experience.
So they created a space in the museum where their visitors could record their stories from the war.
We prepared a set so that they could put their cell phone on a how do you call this thing?
No, I get it. Okay.
There was light.
Yeah.
There was it was quite an intimate space.
Mm-hmm. The visitors could use this space to record something for themselves, or if they wanted to, they could also share it with the museum. I like that idea of not drawing a line between your curatorial staff and the public, because they have shared experiences in it, and it makes the public feel not like visitors in this space. It makes them feel like they're a part of...
It's a space for all of us.
Yeah.
Now in Kiev we are heading to the hardest winter since Ukraine's independence, maybe even since World War II. So we'll see.
Hardest winter because of all of the
gas shortages,
all these other issues,
infrastructure being targeted by missiles and artillery. So we'll see how it goes.
So you kind of live in a foot in two worlds, because you obviously have to deal with the here and now and try and be as flexible and nimble as possible with the war, but you still have to look forward.
We're quite used to living in a few scenarios. Scenario 1 is catastrophic, scenario 3 is optimistic, and then you have a middle scenario. So we are used to doing that. One problem with that is that it's very hard to advance when you have to plan for so many scenarios all the time. But I think we'll be all right. I hope we'll be all right.
Ukrainian rail has in many ways been the lifeblood of the country during the war. Railway employees risking their lives to evacuate hundreds of thousands of people out of occupied areas, with estimates of at least 300 rail employees losing their lives in the effort. Hauling invaluable supplies in from the west for distribution to the hardest hit parts of the country. Trains being seen as a sign of hope and a route to safety by Ukrainians. And it's those same trains that are now being used in a project to inspire and to serve as a very real connection between Ukrainians in the newly unoccupied areas of the east all the way to the west of the country. The project, called Train to Victory, was the brainchild of a Ukrainian PR firm called Grace Totorchuk in collaboration with Ukrainian Rail itself, and they hired the person I'm with, Katya Taylor, to curate the project, working with a group of muralists to paint a train that would be seen by people all across the country. Katya herself wears a number of hats as a freelance curator, project designer, and author, with multiple degrees ranging from economics, finance, and art history, with multiple projects running right now, all directed towards the role of art during the war. And we were lucky enough to spend a fair amount of time with her on this trip. That's pretty cool. There are 7 painted rail cars, and each one represents one of the occupied regions, and the subject matter in each mural revolves around a hero from that region.
It's like each different story is created or interpreted by different artists.
Yeah.
We have some abstract artists in
Yeah.
there, some artists who work more in the realistic manners and so on. So we wanted to tell those stories in a different manner because, you know, each of us has also our own visual language.
Each rail car has a QR code that you can pull up extra information on the hero from that region. Yeah, look at that. So that there is all about
Yeah, you can have it in English. Let's have it in English.
Yeah, there we go. Yeah, so
you see first you see the region which is
which that's from.
Yeah, Zaporizhia. So this is the story of Zaporizhia. We can see that it's listed here. This is the name of the artist, and then we have the story a little bit of the heroes of the region.
That's such a great use of technology.
Yeah, so easy. This is the Crimea. This is just a general image for you. It probably doesn't mean much, but why it is
Ukrainian,
here?
would they kind of
Now, yes, because there is a story behind.
The story is about a young street artist named Bogdan Ziza who protested Russia's occupation of Crimea by throwing paint in the colors of the Ukrainian flag on a Russian government building.
He threw the paint, the yellow and blue paint in them, and the paint started to leak.
So
that's why it's leaking paint. That artist is in jail, probably for the next 15 years or something.
Another impactful mural revolves around Ukraine's wheat fields.
It is about wheat. Ukrainian agricultural people, they keep working while the Russian war, because they were bombing the fields, and the fields started to burn. So there are huge fires. All the fields were in the fire.
Yeah.
And the guys who were working on the fields, they continued actually
To harvest?
Yeah, they continued until the end. So, this is the last one we've got here.
That's perfect timing because I think the train's about to leave again.
Yeah, they're saying goodbye to us. That's so sweet.
That's great, that is, yeah. Thank you very much.
Thank you,
Yeah, absolutely. Nice to meet you live and in person.
Yeah, it's great.
All right, till tomorrow.
Yeah,
see you. Thanks. While Katya and I were doing our interview, the person that organized our filming the Train to Victory, Olia Garkushka from the PR firm Grace Totorchuk, she's the person on the right, managed to get 2 of the muralists from the project, Dmitry Kasyanyuk and Marian Motruk, to come down to the station and talk with us after Katya headed home. We didn't have much time to talk with the fast approaching and strictly enforced 11 p.m. curfew, and I was admittedly learning on the fly with this interview, but we eventually got on track. Oh, okay. And then yours was Donetsk, or?
This is the team. They work together.
Oh, you did the...
We are команда.
I'm getting there. So you painted it together. Mariana and Dmitro painted 2 train cars, one dedicated to Kharkiv and the rail workers who earned the moniker Iron Heroes for putting their lives on the line in their efforts to evacuate as many of their fellow Ukrainians as possible under fire from all manner of Russian artillery. And the other rail car dedicated to Donetsk and the Azov steel plant, where Ukrainian soldiers fought off a vastly larger Russian force that had surrounded the plant in a non-stop siege that lasted 80 days until, after running out of food and supplies, the Ukrainians were given the order to surrender. And as brutal as the siege was, Azovstal became a symbol around the world for the indomitable nature of Ukrainians. What kind of art do you do? What do you do?
Our company paint panzers.
Paint Hunters. So you do like big murals and stuff?
Yeah.
Their company, Paint Hunters, does all manner of work around Kyiv, from big commercial commissions to their own artistic projects. And like so many people here, they've thrown their talents into the ring to help support the Ukrainian war effort, camouflaging civilian vehicles for use on the front lines, painting hospital wards, and war-related murals around town.
We painted anime style.
Yeah, it is total anime style.
This is a story about children from Irpin and Bucha and Kyiv region.
And as it happens a few times a day here, the air raid sirens went off. It's pretty.
We painted.
Oh, that's the series.
The guys didn't even pause in the conversation, and Olia automatically checked an air raid warning app on her phone that gives more detailed information about the warning. It was like this throughout the trip. People would continue about their day having become accustomed to the sound of sirens going off for the last 7 months. That would all change 3 weeks later when Russia greatly increased their attacks on cities and infrastructure all across Ukraine, very much including Kyiv, bringing back the urgency to the sirens. But at this particular moment in time in Kyiv, we kept on with the interview.
We painted military cars.
Yeah. Dmitry is talking about the time the two of them recently filled one of the vans they camouflaged with supplies for the troops and drove it to the front lines of Donbass. Well done. That sounds intense.
You know, it's kind of how Ukrainians live now.
Yeah. It's amazing how people adapt and how people are willing to do extraordinary things in extraordinary times. And that get-to-it attitude of Ukrainians was perfectly encapsulated in one simple shoulder shrug from Marianne.
Yeah, we can do it another way. We're Ukrainians.
I love that. You know what I loved about that was the shrug. It was like, that's what we're going to do. Yeah. But in addition to the air raid sirens, we are also coming up against the 11 p.m. curfew. So it was time to bring things to an end. I really appreciate it. But man, if I can shake your hand, really impressive. It's a pleasure meeting you. Yeah. We're going to stay with street art in this next section because, like what Marian and Dmitry are doing, murals have been showing up across the country and around the world. The walls they're painted on speaking out in constant protest of the war and in support of Ukrainians to the passers-by in the streets around them. Muralists like Sasha Korban, who painted a Ukrainian flag getting stitched together on a wall in Kyiv, or this giant 10-story mural of a traditional Ukrainian woman in Tbilisi, Georgia, painted on a wall not coincidentally directly across the street from the offices of Russian diplomats. Nikita Kravtsov's adaptation of Liberty waving the Ukrainian flag on a wall in the center of Paris, or his collaboration on this mural with Vincent Paranol in Vienna, coincidentally part of a Europe-wide mural project organized by our friend Katya Taylor. Maria Vashchenko lost everything in Kharkiv and is now a refugee in the eastern Ukrainian city of Uzhhorod, where she and her fellow muralists painted 2 stunning walls, bathed in the colors and culture of Ukraine. Which brings us back to Kyiv and the twin sisters Nicole and Michelle Feldman, known as Sestry Feldman. Before the war, they were well known in art circles all around Kyiv as street artists, doing everything from tagging walls all the way up to mural work, cartoons, illustrations. The messages in their work, traditional ones in the street art world, calling out power structures, societal issues. But since the war, that's all changed to one clear focus: supporting Ukraine. Now they're creating everything from small paintings around town with traditional Ukrainian motifs, cartoons with Putin and his one friend, a bomb, a deck of tarot cards with cultural images and figures from the war, and large-scale murals. We started out just walking around the sort of artist neighborhood of Kyiv, talking about the war, about street art, murals, tagging, architecture, talking about where they've been in life and where they see themselves going. Honestly, it was simply a really nice time just hanging out with the two of them. And then we walked by one of their murals, and things jumped right into the meat of the interview.
Kazakhs is like old soldiers of Ukraine. They still have this culture.
The Ukrainian Cossacks date back centuries and to this day are revered fighters, including during this war. They are also a cultural icon that Ukrainians are proud to hold up as a reflection of their resilience as a country, as a symbol of their unshakable nature.
It's about now this spirit. Kazakh is still in the people who stay here.
Yeah.
And the technology changes. They can make attack from drones or information war.
I love that. I love that idea, though, because what we do in this show, and why in large part I wanted to come here, is because of the idea of Russians trying to erase Ukrainian culture. And I love that you're using this cultural figure as a form of resistance in a modern world.
They wanted to ask to all world that you can have no
history,
culture, language and else, but because of war, now everyone knows that you can have culture.
Do you find that since the war started, there's this element of Ukrainians suddenly like, oh my God, we have a really cool culture, right?
Yeah.
Is that true or is that?
Yeah, it's true. Like people feel more patriotic and more interesting in them all roots, stories, and history. Yeah, it's like you understand where you're from. I think like first time when it's happening, like war started, you can't understand how can it happen in real. I wanted to understand как mind psychology of tyrants. Yeah.
Say that again?
Psychology of tyrants.
Psychology of tyrants. Okay. Oh, gotcha. Well, look, your English is actually great, and my Ukrainian doesn't exist, so I don't. So in my mind, you're doing a lot better than I am. Do you think that feeling of pride in culture and knowledge of culture maybe will continue? Maybe not at the same level, but will continue.
Maybe even on more level, like
I like
because it started.
Yeah.
Just and I think we don't want to stop. Like everybody here want to know more about themselves, about history.
Yeah. No, and are all your kind of friends?
Yeah, everybody starts to be interesting and make something for our country.
Yeah. We then headed over to Katya's place to discuss the many projects she has going on right now. The first is her project Artists Support Ukraine Foundation. Together with her partner in this project, Volodymyr Kadyrgrobe, they created a virtual gallery on their Instagram page where people can see protest art created by artists from all over the world. It's also a place where people can make donations, which go towards the foundation.
We have another instrument, is the ready-to-print exhibition. It's like you, for example, Jan, sitting in United States, you say, I want to support Ukraine, what can I do? And I say, you can print exhibition. It's like ready there, like PDF with instruction. You can print exhibition in your city, have it there, invite people for the opening, and then when people come to the opening, they also donate.
You mean print like a full-blown exhibition and hang it and have an event? Yeah,
like it will be a poster exhibition, there will be some installation and video art, so it's kind of cool. It's not just prints. So we had 10 exhibitions in 10 different countries by now, organized by people I've never met in my life.
Right?
Yeah, this is amazing.
With the money raised from donations from their Instagram page and their ready-to-print exhibitions from around the world, they've been able to send mini grants to artists in need around Ukraine.
We send them to the people who are like in Mariupol today or in occupied Kherson. We've been very selective and give that small grants really to people in need. And there are a lot of people like that.
Wow. That's incredible though. I love this idea of art being proactive rather than, I love the painting on a wall or the sculpture in the gallery, but I even more so love it when it's being used to do something important like this, that it can be transformative in someone's life. That's really cool. And there's yet another project she came up with in the first few weeks of the war.
The third project is The Captured House.
The Captured House. The Captured House exhibition toured throughout Europe from April through July. That's a physical...
It is a physical exhibition. This idea to talk to European people about what is going on in Ukraine, not with the media or news or like a general language, but more with a visual language, to talk to, not to their minds, but to their feelings.
Yeah.
We had no money at the beginning, we had no place where we're gonna show them, and generally no idea of how we're gonna bring all that to Europe.
So what's going through my head is you're trying to collect works from 50 different artists, get it all here. You're also trying to arrange where it's going to be shown in Europe. You're also trying to raise money, frankly, in a situation where the vast majority of anyone's spare money is going to support, the military and that sort of thing. So you've got a lot of struggles, let alone just trying to live life in the middle of a war. That's a lot.
My parents didn't want to go away from Kiev because they were from Lugansk, and they did that before 8 years ago, and they said we are not going anywhere.
We're not going again, yeah.
And at the beginning of the march, the Russian troops were just like 20 kilometers from here, so I was really worried for them. I couldn't go abroad because they didn't leave Kiev, so we're all stressed. In the Western Ukraine, there was no places to live, and there is a foundation that actually they called me and said, do you have an idea for the project? And I was like somewhere in the Western Ukraine, totally lost. So I was there in a corridor that there is with the kids and cats and dogs, and somebody's frying the fish right there. And I was like, and they were writing to me saying, do you have an idea for the project? And I'm like, of course I do. Yeah. And I had no idea. I mean, nothing. And I was like, tomorrow morning you're gonna get that.
Were you doing this while you were still there?
Yes. I was preparing the concept and the budget while I was still there, and then somehow my parents agreed to leave Kiev, and they came to me to the Western Ukraine. By that time I had a confirmation about the apartment in Spain that I can rent for them for a year, and by that time I've got a confirmation from the fund that they're gonna sponsor the exhibition. People were very kind to us on every step we did, and there was a guy, very cool guy, who was running this space, Alte Münze in Berlin, and he said, you can have the basement, just look at it. And the basement was just perfect for an exhibition because it was dark, cold, wet, and uncomfortable. Yeah. And I said, exactly, this is perfect for us, because this is exactly how people live now. In Ukraine, because those who didn't leave, they stay in Kiev and Kharkiv in metro, in basements. I mean, I didn't want them to dislike the exhibition, but I want them to feel something different than they usually feel when they look at art. I wanted to talk about people, so the whole exhibition was about the humanitarian catastrophe more than about anything else. Yeah. Because it's like the flow of people moving, in the country and out of the country, and they're like the life of every Ukrainian changed forever. The first opening was in Berlin in May, at the beginning of May, and the last one was in Brussels at the end of July.
Katya had a clear understanding that this exhibition could act as an ambassador to the policymakers of the countries that the exhibition went to.
We are still doing the diplomatic work, the cultural diplomacy work, and we have all the ambassadors at the opening. We have the representative of the local governments. We had some politicians at the opening. Art
is such a visceral or such a raw thing, especially in a time like this, to have art be such a visceral thing on paper or in sculpture or in video. I think it's super important because that gets out to the rest of the world as well.
Since the independence for the last 30 years, we've been developing, it was very hard. The USSR was a very hard disease, so we had time to recover. We had a renaissance of Ukrainian culture in 2014. If we imagine that the war is finished, then we have, I'm sure we're gonna have a boom of that, all different ways of creativity. We are talented in many different ways, so we really need, to be healthy to show all that.
Ви дивитесь програму «Грати песик, дужка гривня», знак питання $0. Я є її ведучий Майкл Щур.
Toronto Television is a satirical series on Ukrainian television that started in 2016 and has expanded since then into a wildly popular YouTube channel as well. The series is in the same genre as The Daily Show, The Colbert Report, Samantha Bee, or Hassan Minhaj, and they are hugely successful. All led by their anchor Roman Ventonyev, who in the show plays an impressively naive character named Michael Schur from Canada, along with his co-host Yaroslava Kravchenko and their cadre of reporters, each of them specializing in their own areas. But then the invasion happened, and with it, their target changed to one clear subject: Russia. Now they're using their individual reporting styles and applying them to the war they've been dropped into, like Anatoly Ostapenko taking deep dives into origins of weaponry and war crimes, Alexandra Hunter discussing issues of Russian propaganda, Max Sherbina dismantling conspiracy theories, Yaroslava Kravchenko taking on perceptions in the West about Russia. Roman himself has dropped the Michael Schur persona and is in the military, serving first as a foot soldier and now as the press secretary of his brigade. And he's still producing occasional segments for Television Toronto itself. And Alina Sheremeta is doing what her colleagues say is the toughest work of all.
Дуже часто прилітає, росіяни обстрілюють ці позиції. Колись тут жили вони, насмітили, тут полишали свої трупи.
Spending much of her time embedded with troops on the front lines.
Отже, ми повернулися з передових позицій. Скажу вам чесно, це було страшно. Коли ми верталися, прильоти були в 20 метрах мінометні.
And make no mistake, while this is satire, comedy, they set an exceedingly high standard for the work they put out there. We spent time with Yaroslava and producer Vitaly Lurasov, as well as Roman, who was home on a day off from the military.
For a bunch of years, we were like a watchdog for the media. So we criticized the media, we made fun of the media, and now we should behave like we are better than the media.
Do you know what is to wear a white coat?
No,
it's like a metaphor when you are wearing a white coat.
Yeah.
It's like you should be perfect, because every your
little thing that gets on it,
they can see it.
The most time we are spending in the office arguing with each other.
Oh, really?
Searching for the truth.
Yeah.
Because if we disagree, if something is wrong, if somebody in this office feels that this is wrong, we should.
All these people.
Really? So
we don't do it.
A lot of your pre-war stuff was
about criticizing government.
And does that exist during war, or is that off during war?
We are now having beautiful government. There's nothing to criticize.
Exactly, yeah.
It would be a disaster to criticize the government now. For example, our President Zelensky, he was much criticized before the war, but on the 24th of February, he really changed. That is the fact. And it's really hard to criticize the person who is working every day and making the stuff which is really amusing. So, but of course, Zelensky is only one person, and the government
is a large,
Yes, but if there would be the situation that we are seeing that is a problem. That is a problem much bigger than we have on the front line. We would talk about it.
But it would take a much higher threshold.
Also, they start English YouTube channel.
We have this expertise, what is Russia, what is going on inside, what is in their mind, and we're trying to tell the Europeans, to the Americans what we know, and they don't.
A great benefit of Toronto Television's YouTube channel is they're now able to produce and post content at will, which makes their news organization much more nimble during the war.
Now we are producing many videos.
It was just weekly show. Now it's interview, it's investigation, it's reports, it's streams.
Producing content directed at Russia wasn't a new concept for them to wrap their minds around. If anything, the war verified already held opinions about their neighbors to the north and east.
We didn't become more hating Russia. We hated Russia and before the war. This distance is very long. Everybody has a personal history of hating Russia, so a collective history of hating Russia. So nothing changed. We really on the 24th of February, I woke up. My brother told me that there is a war, and I feel like, oh, okay, super. Now everybody knows.
It's out in the open. Yeah,
I'm not a psycho.
Everything
we were talking about for years, it's true.
Yeah, I totally get what you said. It's the curtain's been lifted, sort of thing.
It starts in 15th century.
And goes forward from there. And then there's music. The band Kazga created a heartbreaking video early on in the war, and since then has been doing charity concerts and other work all over the world.
No, I'm not okay. It's 4 in the morning and I'm getting no rest. Sister, I'm just doing everything I can.
Коли настане день.
Okean Elzy and its frontman Slava Vakarchuk, a band used to playing packed stadiums around Europe, now plays for the front lines and does countless interviews and charity concerts. The indie folk band Daka Braka has a worldwide fundraising tour that barely leaves time for travel in between gigs. And there are countless others in all genres of music doing whatever they can to make a difference. Which led us to the wildly popular group Onuka and their lead singer Nata Zhyzhchenko. While Onuka is known as a cutting-edge folk electronica band, their music goes much deeper than that label.
Please don't try to explain, 'cause you don't understand.
Nata's own family is steeped in Ukrainian culture, and that culture is infused throughout their music. Some of Onuka's greatest live performances are playing alongside the National Academic Orchestra of Folk Instruments. Nata and her husband Eugene Filatov, who is Nata's other creative half and co-founder of Onuka, and their young son Sasha live in Kyiv, but their home in Chernihiv has been in the family for 5 generations. Nata, only 2 days back from a charity concert in Lisbon, Spain, was kind enough to invite us up to their home there to spend the day with her, and her brother Sasha gave us a ride. Chernihiv is around 150 kilometers north of Kyiv, along one of the 2 main highways the Russians used to try and take Kyiv in February and March. It's also along this highway that the world saw some of the first signs of Ukrainians fighting back and winning. All along the way, there are little villages destroyed, military roadblocks every 10 or 20 kilometers, tank tracks embedded in the highway's asphalt. And you never escape the air raid sirens here. The siege of Chernihiv started on the 2nd day of the invasion, February 25th, cutting off Chernihiv from Kyiv and the rest of the country with regular and seemingly indiscriminate shelling of the city, killing hundreds over the next several weeks. But it all ended around March 31st, when the Ukrainians were able to retake the highway we just came up on, reconnecting Kyiv with Chernihiv, pushing out the Russian troops and ending the siege of the city. This is a place with hard stories to tell, and what happened here is still happening in cities across the front lines of Ukraine. But it's also a place where Ukrainian fighters held the line, resisted the Russian invasion, and won, freeing their own city and playing a key role in helping to stop the Russians from taking Kyiv itself. Chernihiv is one of the most ancient cities in Ukraine, dating back to the 700s with deep cultural roots. And you would be hard-pressed to find a stronger advocate for that culture than Nata. With that in mind, we start out in the early 1990s. I mean, you started playing which instrument?
Sopilka. This is actually mine. I'll show you. And this is made by my grandfather's students. It started from Sopilka.
But this is you at a super young age.
Yeah, 9 maybe, 9. But I started at 4. He taught me, my grandfather, how to play, and I started to play some tunes. And then they became more complicated, and I started to play with orchestras. This is about the impact of my grandfather, who really is my teacher in life.
The band's name Onuka actually means granddaughter, a direct homage to her grandfather. Well, and your grandfather was a big deal in the musical instrument world here.
He's pretty well known, and he made a lot of folk instruments of Ukrainian, instruments of other countries.
Nata's grandfather, Alexander Slonchik, won several national awards and honors during the Soviet Union days. And this was his home workshop, where he and Nata spent countless hours.
He encouraged me to fall in love with Ukraine in childhood, to fall in love with music, with Ukrainian history, with motherland. And it was not like a kind of lectures, it was just a dialogue between granddaughter and grandfather.
Well, it's like this room in a way.
Yeah.
It's just infusing you. All those little moments kind of seep into your DNA.
Yeah, I think that you got it, actually.
That love for folk music would become the foundation for Onuka.
I think that folk, it's so big punch of knowledge, of customs, of traditions, of philosophy.
The part that I thought was so cool about it was what's going on in here is tradition and culture and just an interest in your past, yet your music is super modern.
Yeah. Натискати. Відлік. Тільки. Майбутнє. Готовий.
I wanted to play electronica by Ukrainian instruments. I wanted to show how bandura can sound, how cymbalum, how sopilkas and all these our instruments can sound weird, modern, unique. To show Ukrainian young people how our instruments can look like, can sound like, and to be proud of Ukrainian culture.
Today is, what is it, September, I guess
we are waiting for
September 18th. Watching the news, there seems like there's great progress going on, or progress going on the east.
Yeah.
But all these areas are starting to be taken back. Unoccupied.
Yeah.
There's also hard stories coming out of that. Do you allow yourself room for hope? You know,
space for hope.
space for hope in this.
There is nothing except hope. I have never felt so happy to live here, to belong here, to know what my purpose is. My purpose is to make Ukraine blossom. I understand it like a cultural front, the front line of culture.
Oh, yeah.
What our artists and colleagues do with this donating and charity concerts. I think that this, the front line of culture is also very important, and it's not in comparison with the real front line, but it's supporting arrearguard of it.
We're here because of exactly what you're talking about this second front of culture. I mean, we're not war correspondents. You know, this is a television series about art around culture around the world, and it was seeing Slava Vakarchuk.
Yeah.
I saw him playing the piano, singing this like raspy voice, beautiful, heart-wrenching song. This is a beautiful song. I mean, it was like, wow, that's incredible. And then I saw a couple artists, and one of them was this guy in the East, and I gotta admit, I don't remember what city it was in, but it was getting shelled, just beaten up. And he was in a cellar, and he was with the family, and he's an artist, and he just started sketching. So, and somehow these sketches came out and wound up, I think, in the New York Times or something like that. But I was like, wow, this is also incredible, because it's art, and art's getting out and influencing people around the world. And it was at that stage that I thought, we got to go there. Onuka has had a non-stop fundraising tour all across Europe, as well as a 6-city charity tour across the United States when this happened.
There was a moment we had such bracelets with Ukrainian flags, and we have a lot of equipment like instruments, and we were just having some domestic flights in America, and the captain saw these bracelets, and he made an announcement there. Here is musical orchestra from Ukraine, and they're touring the world with charity concerts, and everyone was applauding, and it was a moment like in a movie. It was some kind of this moment when you understand that you are not alone in this.
Yeah. Like so many other public figures, Nata is also involved with a long list of fundraisers, including Help Kharkiv, the big one, United 24, Repair Together, a group that, among other things, gets volunteers to clean up damaged and destroyed places, Spunbond, an organization that provides medical supplies and care to people in need, and one here in Chernihiv called This Is My City that's grown well beyond its initial goals. A group we're on our way to meet with now. But it's not possible to drive through Chernihiv without seeing the impact of the siege.
It looked like another world, actually. And it happened during first 3 or 5 days, so it was the first shock for everyone. And these images were the first on the news, on air, through the world. And Mariupol looks like this entirely.
Mariupol, Bakhmut, Kherson, Crimea, and countless other cities from large to small that are barely a shadow of their former selves after Russian bombing. And then that's a hospital that got bombed?
Yeah, it's a hospital for heart diseases.
I mean, that, for whatever reason, you can so see an impact of a rocket or something. Yeah, the back of cabinets and clothes, and you see plates.
Some sheets.
Yeah, a room.
Towels.
I mean, just lives and
Someone's
history
life.
and all these things just gone in an instant. This is a charity tournament?
Yeah, it's a charity tournament. I think that some of them were on front line and they returned.
If you are looking for hope, then look no further than what this group of friends have created to help their fellow Ukrainians.
Actually, this is Sasha.
Sasha.
Hey, nice to meet you. Ian, nice to meet you.
Це моє місто. It's like this is my city, the name of this charity foundation.
Oh, okay.
And this tournament is managed by them. He is responsible for work here.
I have a lot of friends, military friends and policemen guys from Chernihiv.
It started like an organization for helping and supporting friends, but it grew to the big foundation who help provide support all over Ukraine.
The idea was to help Chernihiv, but
it grew to something bigger.
Expanded,
yeah.
And there are countless organizations that have sprung up all across Ukraine like this one, made up of people just wanting to help. The guy on the left is Sergey, and we were just hanging out talking about his time competing in the London Olympics when this came up.
Actually, he saved my family. When Chernihiv was in circle in match, so it was difficult situation here. He take out a lot of people from Chernihiv to Kyiv.
2,000 people.
2,000 people.
What? Sergey's story is one that everyone here is proud of, so everyone joined in the telling. But in essence, here's what happened. When Chernihiv was surrounded by the Russians and the highway up here was covered in Russian tanks, Sergey and his friends took the back roads. What would normally be a 150-kilometer 2-hour trip on a highway became a 350-kilometer 7-hour trip on the back roads, with the ever-present danger of being blown up by a tank or a landmine. On the first trip, they had a caravan of 20 cars, but after that, they only had 10 because people dropped out from the obvious danger. And as if that weren't dangerous enough, Sergey and his friends decided to haul barrels of gas and oil up to Chernihiv to help supply Sasha's military friends here. So you would bring gas up here, and then in that same trip, you would bring people back? Am I understanding that, or is that a different...
Gas from Kiev to Chernihiv and people from Chernihiv
back.
to
People
Kiev.
back, yeah.
This was one of the more incredible stories we heard here, but it definitely wasn't the only one. And they were all told in that sort of nonchalant, it's just what we did way. Thanks for telling that story, man. Wow. Wow. A style of storytelling that seems to come from being in the middle of a war. That was great.
Thanks.
Yeah. We've talked about how the war has kind of affected or maybe even changed what people see themselves doing in the future in their lives. You know, just kind of made them, you know what, this is kind of what I want to do with the rest of my life.
Absolutely.
Has it had that effect on you, do you think?
I think connection between each other
Yeah.
more stronger. So
Yeah.
we understand that we can do much more than was before.
The war is a big challenge. It is a big challenge.
It is, it's
but
war,
it also
yeah.
creates opportunities, you know, it makes people more resilient. It makes people, I mean, Ukrainians, I mean, they are, I think, the most resilient people in the world, you know. I saw people in the villages, they were getting out on the streets and were trying to stop the tank with their bare hands.
I saw those.
No,
stories,
it was mind-blowing to me.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
I want to live in that country. Because when you see those kind
I love that.
when you see
That's
those kind of
perfect.
people, you know,
Separately,
when you see
we're
this-
talking just the same monologue,
Exactly.
actually.
Yeah, totally.
Привет.
Yeah.
Hi, Ian.
Nice to meet you. Yeah.
Nice to meet you too.
She's been telling me all about you. So are you cool with coming around with us?
Absolutely, I'd love to.
Stas's day job is as a website designer, but he's also started a non-profit called Chernihiv Lace, restoring traditional houses. In normal times, this work helps preserve the history of the region, but in wartime, preserving traditional homes like these takes on all sorts of additional meaning. And Stas's restoration projects have no shortage of people wanting to jump in and be a part of preserving culture here. Stas even gives tours through the city of the houses they've worked on, as well as some that they haven't. On top of all of this, he's also in the army. You got conscripted February 24th, but did you have any military background?
No.
I didn't think so.
Zero.
Zero.
Yeah.
And which is not uncommon with so many people that got conscripted, I suppose.
Yeah, there was no other way to stop Russia.
Stas is stationed here in Chernihiv and fought during the Russian siege of the city. And like Nata was saying, you had 2 friends that were killed.
4 out of 13 people.
Wow.
So four people were killed, 3 were injured, and only 6 people managed to get out of it without a scratch,
Really?
including me. Yeah, so
Yeah.
I got lucky.
And they were all before this started, they were just doing whatever they did for their daily lives.
Yeah, they were just, regular people, not related to military. I started working on this house last fall.
Yeah.
And I wanted to finish it this year.
Yeah.
Regardless of the war.
So he used his days off from the military to finish the project.
People who walk by this house on a daily basis look at this and see that there's still, a beam of light and hope and some move forward. This is something that makes people smile. And since we're able to do this, then why not?
Keep doing it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, this is Ukraine.
This is Ukraine. This is northern Ukraine.
Yeah.
This is typical for the north of Chernihiv Oblast and the north of Sumska Oblast.
Yeah.
And the people who who built these houses, they had style. They had a sense of aesthetics.
I love that. Yeah, absolutely.
Every house owner wanted to be unique. He or she wanted to be different from his or her neighbors.
Yeah.
Basically, people were show-offs in a good way. Most of these houses belong to several owners. And this dates back to when the Soviets conquered these areas. So people who used to own this house were kicked out.
Mm-hmm.
And this house was divided between several other people who didn't have any connection to this property.
As a result, so many of these great old places fell into disrepair over the coming decades. Stas's restoration philosophy revolves around the idea that these homes are ever-evolving things.
Yeah, look at these colors. They are modern. They're contemporary.
They are.
It's an interesting observation of how people react to these kind of decisions, because obviously these colors are not typical.
No.
They are not historical. Honestly, I'm not a supporter of sort of, fighting for some historical appearance of whatever, because this color is something that helps you embed this piece of history into today's reality.
I love this idea of respecting culture and tradition, but part of that respect, in my mind, is letting it evolve and move into the future.
Yep.
So instead of making it a stagnant thing, and to me that respects it, and it keeps it progressing.
It mattered. Dobry deň. So it mattered for me to put my hand on this house and bring it back to life. Plus, because it belongs to several owners as well, it used to be painted in all kinds of colors, and you clearly see that it belongs to different people who don't talk to one another when they when they decide to paint their.
I've seen houses like that.
Yeah. One of the important conditions of restoring this house when we talked to the owners was that we will collectively choose a color scheme which would work for everybody, and at the same time would paint the house as if it belongs to a single family.
Yeah.
So it looks uniform. I mainly think about passing this over to the next generation. It's something that we can put our hands on today, and then preserve and pass over to whoever comes next.
Yeah.
And this is how we pay respect to people who built this.
As our time up here in Chernihiv was coming to an end, we made our way back to Nata's house. See, I've said it over and over again on this trip, but it's so incredible to see everybody, at least that we've run into at every level, just doing whatever they can do to pitch in and make a difference.
We have a very rough way to our freedom, but it would be very deeply cherished.
We talked about hope earlier and the need for hope and the existence of hope in Ukrainians.
And the hope is so big that it can't contain in me. I can't contain
it. Yeah.
It's bigger than my mind.
Yeah. But with the 11 p.m. curfew fast approaching, it's time to stop.
Треба їхати вже.
Time to go?
I think
Okay. We got a curfew to beat.
not to be stuck here.
Yeah. All right. We spent the last few hours of our stay here filming around town before our train ride back to Poland. While filming right under the Independence column in Maidan Square, I happened to see some beautifully painted I-beam battlements that are actually called hedgehogs across the street. I had read about these before our trip, that a woman was painting hedgehogs around town with traditional Ukrainian motifs, so we headed over to have a look. While we were filming, a woman came up and set down some boxes next to the hedgehogs and started to unpack her gear. That woman was the person who was painting the hedgehogs, Varvara Logvyn, just happening to come down to the square on a Sunday afternoon to paint some more. I introduced myself and we had a quick chat before heading off to catch our train. But it was this moment of happenstance that for me became the perfect anecdote for what's happening here. While Varvara has a very successful business in her normal life, she also has a university degree in art and wanted to use that talent not only as an outlet of her own expression during the war, her own form of resistance, but also to add something to the people's lives around her, to give them something to smile about, to be inspired by coming down to the center of Kyiv on her free time to paint. Imbuing an object of war with the cultural motifs of the people it's there to defend. That attitude is my lasting impression of Ukrainians. In a war whose intent is to erase, to cow a population into submission, it's done the exact opposite, uniting a country in a singular fight for their freedom. The people we met with here are representatives of the millions more Ukrainians in all corners of society doing the same thing, contributing in any way they can. Ukrainians were unwillingly dropped into this crucible of war, but as hard and as brutal as it has been, and surely still will be, there seems no doubt in the people's minds we met here that what will emerge from that crucible will be a stronger country, filled with people who have a renewed sense of pride in their history and who will carry their proud culture and country into the future.
Gustavus Adolphus College equips students to lead purposeful lives and act on the great challenges of our time. Gustavus, make your life count.